The theme today is that's okay. So the theme today is MS4 compliance. I would just like to go around and have everyone just say hi, who they are and where they're from. I'm sorry, I know some people have their mouths full. I hope you don't mind. Maybe we can start with the people online today, which will include our wonderful presenters. So should we do a call on people or?
You can do it any other. You just no.
Okay, I'll go across the screen. Okay, so we'll start with Chris Stone.
Hi there. Can you hear me okay? Chris Stone with Deep Stormwater Program.
Thank you. David Dickson.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Dave Dickson, Interim Director of the Center for Land Use Education and Research here at UConn. We do a lot with outreach to communities on things like the MS4 permit and other things as well.
Wonderful. Mary Looney.
Hi, I'm Mary. I'm also part of UConn Clear. I am the municipal stormwater educator, so I'm kind of specifically focused on the communities that are regulated by the MS4 permit.
Great, thank you. Karen Allen.
Hi, I'm Karen Allen. I'm the supervisor of the Stormwater Permitting and Enforcement Group here at DEEP.
Wonderful, thanks, Karen. Shauna Losella.
Hi, I'm Shauna Lozella, the Assistant City Engineer for the City of Shelton. Nice to see you all.
Wonderful, thank you. Dawn Henning.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dawn Henning. I'm Assistant City Engineer for the City of New Haven.
Thanks, Dawn. Nicole Kibbe? Sorry, I don't want to say.
It's Kibbe.
Okay, great.
I'm also with Deep Stormwater.
Okay, great, thank you. I see we have Karen here. I don't know if Karen wants to say hi. You could also pass. I see Ricardo is here from, Karen is a transportation engineer in our office. Ricardo is the brownfields manager in our office. And I think that's everybody online. So if you want to maybe go around and start with you, sir.
Ed Bell, Town of Wolcott. Fred Agee, Borough of Naugatuck. Jim Stewart, Naugatuck Public Works. Rob Langen, our Superintendent of Water for Waterbury.
Paul Benevich, Watertown Town Engineer.
Stacy Safchek, Land Use Administrator in Thomaston.
John DeCarlo, Municipal Shared Services Director, NVCOG.
Kate Michello, Communications Associate at NVCOG. Desiree Blanchard, Communications and Community Engagement Manager at NVCOG.
Aaron Woodruff, Senior Regional Planner here at NVCOG.
Josh LeCarp, Planning Director, NVCOG.
Noreen Brady, City of Waterbury, Engineering Department.
Bob Grand Prix, Watertown Highway Department Superintendent.
Great, and I'm Christine O'Neill. I'm the Regional Environmental Planner here, and those owls were really working hard to make sure everybody got included there. Awesome, so now I think I'll turn it over to Josh, our Director of Planning, to talk a little bit about what this new Environmental Sustainability Forum, sort of the purpose of this group.
Sure. So I think all of you are familiar with our environmental staff here, and we wanted to make sure that we did sufficient amount of outreach to our towns and our town staffs to provide some support for environmental issues that you're all facing, and give you an opportunity to ask questions and to interact with peers. So what we've got in mind is essentially a quarterly series of meetings, informal lunch and learn type of sessions. We're certainly welcoming to anybody that wants to get back in touch with Christine and offer a particular topic that is, of concern. One other thing that we're going to be doing over the next bunch of months for the environmental area specifically is to add a list of online resources and links that staffs can use if they're looking for references or federal regulations, et cetera, to just try to compile that into a single source for your use. Beyond that, we're looking at a pretty broad field that's got a lot going on in it in the environmental area. So I've thought in a preliminary way about assigning the next topic to be something related to food and food security, which is a little bit further afield from what a lot of the public works folks deal with. But bear with us, we're certainly welcoming, like I said, to any other concerns that you have. And if you have some suggestions for future topics, definitely feel free to extend the invitation to any of your colleagues, as well as members of the public or commissions in your town that have an interest in environmental issues generally. And, we'll see where it goes. I think there's definitely want to thank everybody who's been able to attend today, both online and in person. We will feed you, and got free parking in the back. So trying to make this as enjoyable an experience as possible. And with that, I will let you all get started on the meeting.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I would like to turn it over to the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection with Chris Stone and Karen Allen. They will be doing our first and perhaps the most pertinent presentation today, and that's going to be on the status of the NVCOG region in terms of compliance with MS4, and of course also just some overarching best practices and tips. So with that, I don't know if Karen or Chris is speaking first, but I'll turn it over to them, and hopefully you're able to share your screen.
Yep, this is Chris. Let's see if I can get my screen up here. All right, how's that? Can you see that?
Yes, sir.
All right. So it's haven't had a chance to do a presentation in a while. Of course, it's still not live, it's virtual, but we're glad to be getting a little bit back to normal. We are the Deep Stormwater Program. We have a motto we've used for a long time: rain happens. I tell people all the time, as long as it keeps raining, I got a job. So well, I don't think that's going to stop anytime soon. But we're talking today about the compliance issues that come up, and it's not just NVCOG. It's we get this coming up in a lot of pretty much all across the state. Just to give you an idea of who we're talking about, this is our Urbanized Area Map. These are the towns that are included in the MS4 permit. The towns that are cross-hatched in my incredibly professional looking cross-hatching job here are the 8 new towns that we added last time we had a census update, and all these pink areas, red areas you see are urbanized areas, which is a Census Bureau term. Just as an FYI, the Census Bureau has finally finished up their 2020 census analysis. They have not put these maps out yet for the 2020 census, but those should be coming shortly. And at that point, we will see where and how much this map may have expanded. We've got over obviously in the Naugatuck+Valley, here's our NVCOG folks. There's one little town right there in NVCOG, Bethlehem, I guess, that is not part of the MS4 program, but who knows this time around if they'll get pulled in with the 2020 census. A quick reminder, your stormwater management plan under your MS4 permit is really based around these 6 minimum control measures. Some of these, as you've become well aware, are tougher than others to comply with. Public education outreach is just that. It's letting people know why stormwater is an issue. Public participation is just that. Getting not just individuals, but businesses, organizations to help out with your MS4 program. And one of the things we tell people all the time is get as much help as you can. Chances are if there's something you need to do, there may be someone else out there who's already doing it, and rope them in and call them part of your program. That brings us to one of the tough ones: illicit discharge detection and elimination, the IDDE program. It's tough because eventually it means looking in almost every pipe in your town to see if there's something in there besides stormwater, something that shouldn't be there, some kind of an illicit discharge. Construction site runoff is a pretty simple one. For Connecticut, at least, we have had the Erosion Sediment Control Act since the 80s. Every town has their own construction regulations, so that's pretty much a done deal before we even had the MS4 permit. Post-construction gets a little more complicated, but again, a lot of this gets tied in with the construction program. So a lot of towns have got a pretty good head start on here. And then pollution prevention, good housekeeping is a lot of it is how a town manages their operations, but also included in there is our program now to track and reduce the impervious area in your town. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. And actually, I think our friends from CLEAR are going to talk about that even more. So here are the NVCOG municipalities, and I'll let Karen take the next couple slides here.
Unmute myself. Okay, thanks, Chris. So as Chris already mentioned, 18 of the 19 Naugatuck+Valley municipalities are part of the MS4 program. So Bethlehem is the outlier. So we don't need to run through them, Chris, if you want to just move on to the next slide. As you all probably are aware, the submission of an annual report is a requirement of the federal program, which is why it's a condition of our general permit. Every year we receive, we're now up to, I think it's 131 municipalities and institutions that are part of the MS4 program. And usually around mid-March or so, we start getting sort of the floodgates open up and getting the annual reports in. Taking a look at the folks in Naugatuck+Valley, you know, for the most part, the region has been doing pretty well in terms of submittal of the reports. You can see, I mean, we always have a few outliers. Across the board, we never get 100% compliance in terms of getting the annual reports in. We do leave our window open for a while, and then sometime around mid-May or so, we'll start reaching back out to the towns that we have not heard from. As a reminder, please, you know, submit the annual report. So far this year, again, sort of very consistent with what we're seeing across the board. The Naugatuck+Valley towns, about half have submitted the annual reports to date, and that's, as I said, consistent with what we're seeing across our entire universe at this point in time. If you are having issues, obviously we know this is a tough program to implement. COVID has not helped over the last couple of years. If it appears that you're just not going to be able to get this in a timely fashion, please just do reach back out to us and let us know when you anticipate getting an annual report in. We would much rather have the report come in late than not come in at all. Can go to the next one, Chris. So in terms of looking at the annual reports that we've gotten from the NVCOG, and again, as Chris said, this is pretty consistent across the board in terms of the things that we do see. One thing we do want to ask is please do submit the report electronically. It is not necessary for it to come in a hard copy, although we do still get a handful every year, but it's really helpful for us in terms of tracking and making the reports available if you can submit them electronically. The transmittal forms obviously need to go into our central processing unit, but the reports themselves, if they can be submitted through our deep stormwater staff email, it just makes a lot easier for us, again, for tracking and also for making the reports available to both the folks at Yukon Clear, the environmental organizations often ask for them. Occasionally we get public inquiry. Other things we ask is if you are not already using our annual report template, please, we highly recommend it. It's not a requirement, but the template, by using the template, you know you're providing us with the information that we are looking for. Be aware the template gets tweaked every year between Yukon, the folks at Clear and us, we try to make some improvements to the template every year. So if you're going to recycle last year's template, do check to see what we post at the beginning of the year to see if there have been any changes. Other important things that we do see that sometimes go missing or are incomplete are any task completion dates. It's not uncommon, particularly if a report, I'm sorry, is this Chris?
What? Oh.
Hold.
There.
Hold
All right.
on, I'm sorry. Okay. I'm like, what's happening? Okay. Yeah, that's and the funny thing is we're both actually in the office. We're just in two different cubes in the office. So anyway, okay, so getting back to this, things to make sure that you double check, particularly if you do end up using the same template every year. Make sure your completion dates are accurate. It is not uncommon for us to see something that was supposed to be completed a couple of years ago, and the date doesn't get updated on when the report comes in. So now we're not sure. It's like, did it get completed? Did it not get completed? And you want to just make sure that you're getting credit for everything that you are accomplishing through this program. Signatures are often missing, and that is a requirement. We love our paperwork, but it is a requirement of the Clean Water Act in terms of documents that are submitted. Task metrics, we would rather you tell us that if you haven't started something, progress is stalled, please do not leave a blank or a question mark, because again, we don't know where things are at, and you may not be getting credit for things that you've done. Requested units, this is something, so Nicole, who is also on this call, she is our newest stormwater staff person. She just started back in December, and she went through all of the reports, and she was, one of the things she mentioned is like, it'd be nice, some people will provide percentage of outfalls that have been screened instead of the number. And sometimes, apparently somebody provided DCIA and like square footage, or so anyway, please just be aware of that. And then lastly, some of these things, these reports can get pretty long. We don't need you to send us a copy of the report of our general permit. And any public education materials, if you've got things available on your town website, you're perfectly welcome to just give us a link. You do not need to be providing everything that way. So that shortens down what needs to actually get sent in to us. So, and I think that's it from our perspective. Again, these are specifically what Nicole saw through some of the NVCOG towns, but it's pretty consistent across the board in terms of what we see through all of our annual reports that come in. What's on our next slide, Chris?
Okay, so just a quick rundown here. What we're seeing in the more recent years, and I talked about some of those problem sections, the tougher sections. It's been actually pretty encouraging. We've got about 2/3 out there that have completed their IDVE plan. That's the plan to detect illicit discharges, which is a pretty tough program. And more than 90% of you have completed your outfall mapping, which is really kind of key to the whole program. It's key to the IDVE program. It's also key to some of our impaired waters monitoring and our impervious cover. The outfall screening is what I was talking about with the impaired waters, screening outfalls that discharge to impaired waters for different pollutants. And over half have completed at least a good part of that outfall screening. And again, thanks to our friends at Yukon Clear, everybody should have their DCIA mapping, which is the impervious cover mapping. Directly connected impervious area is what DCIA is. And Yukon Clear has those for free on their website. You can download your town. You can, so consequently, most people really already have that baseline DCIA, and that's really the key part for figuring out moving forward how we disconnect the DCIA. That's the tougher part. That's, you know, we've really only had 2 towns in NVCOG that reported some progress on DCIA. It doesn't mean that they that other towns haven't had some progress, but again, if we don't see it in the annual reports, we don't know about it. So, and you know, tracking your disconnection of this directly connected impervious area is the tough part. And again, just to remind people, you know, a lot of people refer to this as the retrofit requirement, that you actually go in and retrofit existing sites to disconnect the impervious cover. That's only part of the equation. The other part of the equation is for any private development that comes before a town. If it's a redevelopment project, you know, a local strip mall is doing a redevelopment, under our permit, under the town's program, those towns have to disconnect some of their DCIA to retain the water quality volume. So you can also take credit for those private development disconnections. And then I always put in a plug, and this will lead a little bit into with the DCIA and this next slide here into CLEAR's program. I always put in a plug for Stormwater Utilities. Hopefully you're all aware that we now finally have a community, New London, that has a stormwater utility in Connecticut. And New London now has a resource of about $1.3 million a year, I believe, that they can put toward their stormwater program, and not just MS4 compliance, but fixing flooding issues and disconnection issues and pollution issues. They've reduced their beach closures by 80 or 90% by using this utility money. This is actually an older map. It's not up to date, but it gives you an idea that pretty much the rest of the country has been doing stormwater utilities for as long as 30, 40 years now. And even now in New England here, New York State now has some, Rhode Island's developing them. We now have one, New Jersey's developing them. So it's kind of the way things are going. So that's what we've got. Here's the stormwater staff. As we mentioned, Nicole on the call here is our newest member, but we have others here. Nicole, myself, and Karen are focused on the MS4 work too. So feel free to reach out to any of us if you have questions about that. And that's it for Deep. I will stop sharing here.
Thank you so much.
I'll leave this up for a second more to get phone numbers if anyone wants them.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so I think we'll probably save questions until all 3 have presented. So thank you so much for that. That was excellent. And as you identified, the sort of disconnection is one of the biggest themes that we see towns struggling with. So with that, I will turn it over to Yukon Clear or NEMO with Mary Looney, who's prepared a wonderful presentation just about that exactly. So Mary, take it away.
Yeah, let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay, let's see if I can get this. Okay.
There you go.
Perfect. Hardest step done. So makes the rest of this easier. Like Christine mentioned, I'm Mary. I'm a part of CT NEMO, which is a part of Yukon Clear. And I'm going to be going over meeting those DCIA disconnection targets like Chris had mentioned before. So in this presentation, we are going to be going over some DCI disconnection kind of overview, permit talk, and some examples. And we are going to talk about how to reach these targets using legal authorities. So just a quick overview or a reminder for you, DCIA stands for Directly Connected Impervious Area. And this is the impervious area which drains stormwater runoff into catch basins or directly into water bodies. So you can see the picture on the right, we have this storm drain, it's surrounded by that pavement or that impervious area. And then the stormwater then just runs along, it picks up volume, it picks up pollutants, and it carries them directly into the stormwater drain. And so disconnecting DCIA by the permit is when the minimum amount of the water quality volume is retained on site, or basically it's infiltrated. So if you have a site that has less than 40%, you are retaining that first inch. And if you have a site of more than 40% DCIA, you are retaining that first half inch. That first half inch is really just to help with those sites that have a lot of DCIA coverage. So, you know, on the opposite, you can see the picture again, that stormwater is running off on the impervious area, but because it's draining into the grass, it's being infiltrated into the ground, and those pollutants are being carried off into the storm drains and therefore into the waterways. So the permit requires towns to create a plan to disconnect that 2% of their DCIA by 2022 with a 5-year look back. So from 2012 onwards, if you have any projects that have been disconnected, they can also count towards your 2% goal. So like Chris said, that baseline DCIA, a lot of people have met that, but it's really getting that 2% goal of those disconnections. And then after 2022, towns should be disconnecting 1% annually. And like mentioned before, you're going to track and report that progress in your annual report. We also have our streamlined annual report out. This basically just also includes the exact permit language for each requirement. So this is available on our website if you are interested in that. And so some things to think about when it comes to DCIA disconnection is targeting your municipal and public areas first, and really thinking about those large expanses of impervious cover. So where you can get the most bang for your buck, where you can implement a really large practice of green stormwater infrastructure. And you can do this going to sites directly. You can use Google Maps Street View to get a better idea of sites. CT Eco has a lot of great map layers for you to take a look at. And look for opportunities for education and signage where your green stormwater infrastructure can be on display. You can have signs that kind of promote awareness for stormwater pollution and how green stormwater infrastructure is a great way to reduce those pollutants in the waterways. Also keep in mind maintenance. Unfortunately, all of these green stormwater infrastructure practices do require some level of maintenance. So definitely keep that in consideration. Think about your resources, your budgeting, your staffing when you are considering implementation. And also think about future projects. Sometimes it's a lot easier to review site plans before they're actually put in place, and think about where you can already start on those disconnections rather than going to different areas and looking for disconnections after the fact. And then you can, again, move on and work on incentivizing homeowners and business owners to disconnect as well and add to that 2% or 1% goal. So green stormwater infrastructure, GIS, also commonly referred to as low impact development or LID, these terms are interchangeable, is basically, it maintains that pre-development hydrology. And so it's a natural way to kind of capture and infiltrate that stormwater runoff. So taking a look at rain gardens and bioretention areas are pretty much just like bigger rain gardens. And these are depressed areas around 6 inches into the ground, filled with soil and native plants, sometimes even trees, stones, maybe to help with erosion, depending on your site. They can be done in large grassy areas. They can be put in right at the base of a downspout to disconnect that area. And they're also really aesthetically pleasing. So, they look great wherever they are. And we have tons of resources. We have an entire portion of our website dedicated to rain gardens. We have an app that has a plant database and tools for implementation and design. And coming soon, we'll also have our Green Stormwater Certification course. So you can become an expert on implementing rain gardens. We also have bioswales. These are very similar to rain gardens and bioretention areas. They're just a bit longer and narrower. And these pictures are actually from New Haven, Connecticut, where they recently implemented, I think, over 200 bioswales to help combat flooding. So you can see here they have curb cuts on the left-hand side where the stormwater can run in and then drain into these bioswales through the soil portion or through those stones. And they also have the grates on the end for overflow for very hefty storms with a lot of stormwater coming in. And they also, again, they look really nice. They're absolutely beautiful. And if it's something that you are really considering for your town or interested in, we actually have those exact plans for the bioswales that New Haven used on our website. Rain barrels are super self-explanatory. They're exactly how they look in the picture. They're a way for you to collect and harvest that rainwater. One of the best examples is a couple of years ago, Hartford started Retain the Rain program, where they actually provided the rain barrels to residents to help with their disconnection. And so not only is it disconnecting your Dcia in your area, but it's collecting that rain that residents can then use to water their lawns, water their garden, their plants, their house plants. So it really is a great way and a really super simple disconnect. And finally, we have pervious pavement. These two pictures are from the UConn Stores campus. You can have pervious pavement in a variety of different ways, but the main part of the pervious pavement is that the base is not compacted. So it allows for that water to percolate through. So on the left, we have pervious interlocking concrete pavement. And so that water can trickle through those little gaps that they have in between each of the concrete blocks. And on the other side, we have pervious asphalt. And pervious asphalt or pervious concrete is really similar to the traditional mix, but they leave out some of those finer particles to allow for more gaps in the mixture so the water can trickle through. And so one of the best ways or really getting at this disconnection is going through legal authorities. The permit requires that you establish your legal authority by July of 21 or 22, done to the maximum extent practicable. So everything that you can, given your resources and staffing and budget, and also explaining any barriers that you have in your annual report. And then going forward, we also have our legal authority guide, which is going to sum up everything that I'll go through. But definitely take a look. It's on our legal authority page. You can find the website right at the bottom here. And so the first step is to review your local guidances and regulations for barriers. So going through your zoning regulations, your street design requirements, really finding where there might be any prevention towards implementing LIDs and trying to reduce or eliminate where you can. And so we have tons of resources for you on our post-construction website or webpage. Different tools that will help you not only promote and create regulations that will help increase low impact development, but also going through your regulations to try and reduce those barriers. But also check with NVCOG for suggestions for your town. A couple years ago, Amber just actually participated in a workshop that we had and talked about assessing the barriers in LIDs for local regulations in NVCOG town. So definitely check out and see what they have for you. It also states that developers shall consider LIDs first. So before consideration of any other practices or local guidances. This applies to new and redevelopment sites of a ½ acre or larger, unless those smaller sites are already regulated by your town. But again, we have resources that kind of address all different stages of development. So ones that have tools for reviewing site plans and those LID checklists, those templates, like I mentioned before, some of them are from New Haven, and then tools for maintaining those LIDs, which is important to look at before construction as well as after. Again, like I said, kind of gauging what you have based on your resources and then maintaining afterwards, making sure you can get the properly maintain or manage that rainwater runoff the best that you can. And we have another great webinar from Linda Painter from the town of Mansfield, and she goes through the LID checklist that they use for their site plan reviews. And then you are infiltrating your first inch or your first half inch of the rainfall on site. So this is the Dcia disconnection, what the practices that we just talked about and many different others that you can use. If this is not feasible, they're all, you have alternative options. You're explaining why in your annual report, what barriers you're experiencing. You are proposing alternative sites or projects for stormwater management, or you're paying a fee in lieu of to be put towards other stormwater managements and focus on that Dcia disconnection. And then finally, I just have a quick example. This is from Colchester. So in 2015, they updated their zoning regulations so that no more than 75% of their parking lots could be made up of impervious cover. And that 25% they promoted, minimizing the clearing, conserving those natural pervious surfaces like green spaces and trees, as well as using pervious materials, for the parking surfaces. And so in order to kind of optimize the amount of parking space they had, most did choose incorporating those pervious materials. And so they've seen more than 10 new private installations of pervious paving, as well as 3 new projects for local schools that are in the works. And so here we have some examples. You see that the base is kind of like that gravelly layer, it's not compacted. And if you want more information on this, you can check out our MS4 newsletter from this winter, where there's an interview with the town engineer from Colchester talking about this new regulation. One of the things I will say that's really interesting about it is oftentimes pervious pavement is seen as, it is a bit more labor intensive, it can be a bit more expensive. But with this new incorporation of the new regulation in 2015, they've actually seen over the years the supply kind of meet the demand. So they've had local contractors with experience in pervious paving come into Colchester and kind of help reduce that, that burden and that fee of the pervious asphalt over time. So I think that's all I have today. Again, my name is Mary, municipal stormwater educator, AKA all things MS4. My email's at the bottom, feel free to reach out. I also should have mentioned at the beginning, Dave Dickson, introduced himself at the beginning. He'll also be available at the end for any questions you might have.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mary. That was fantastic. And one of the things you mentioned there is that New Haven had some really great rain gardens sort of built into their sidewalks. That's very exciting because we have Dawn here today. Dawn is works in the city engineering department for New Haven, and she's going to talk about what some of this conceptual stuff looks like in action and what New Haven has done to comply with the MS4 permit. So thank you, Clear/Nemo, and we'll turn it over to Dawn with New Haven.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. Thank you, Mary, for that great introduction. It'll make my presentation much easier. So let me see if I can't share and get to presenter mode somehow. Aha, are we seeing my screen on the slides?
All set.
Okay, great. So yeah, I guess I will share some of our experience here in New Haven. Again, I'm Dawn Henning. I'm assistant city engineer. So I work on a lot of different things in the city, but stormwater is near and dear to my heart. I started my career as a swim model consultant. And so I would say if I have an expertise in anything, it's in stormwater management. And so the different ways that New Haven is tackling, disconnecting impervious area and reducing our stormwater runoff really is in line with what Mary shared. So we have a zoning ordinance, starting with, I guess, private property, what we have the least, at least for the engineering department, the least kind of jurisdiction over. Our zoning ordinance has, as of 2011, section 60 of our zoning ordinance covers stormwater management plans. And so If you have a development coming through the City Plan Commission that has any of these conditions, I won't read them for you, then you have to meet our stormwater management ordinance, and it includes capturing 1 inch of runoff over your site. So I know the MS4 permit kind of changes the requirement of the water quality volume that you have to capture based on how much DCIA. I guess we're more conservative and we just say if you meet these conditions, then you have to capture that 1st inch. That also helps with pre and post runoff. So generally, if you are retaining that, you are also reducing your post-development runoff. There's other requirements, but I would say that retention requirement is probably one of the biggest ones that we're able to hold developers to, and we've been having a lot of development. And when I say developers, I also mean ourselves. So when we're doing work on public facilities, we also have to meet this requirement. And so this is a picture from an example. We had a 6-acre site. We had to capture 12,000 cubic feet of runoff. So, we know how difficult it is sometimes to meet these, and it can be frustrating to developers who say, well, I'm only doing this, I don't want to dig up my parking lot, and but this is our only opportunity to really retrofit impervious area and do these improvements. And so but we also have to practice what we preach, and so we are also have experience in meeting this ordinance. And then, we look to the public right of way and what can we do in the public right of way to reduce runoff and implement green stormwater infrastructure. And here I'm just showing kind of the multiple reasons why we've, the permit is a motivation, but also, we have areas that flood. We have areas with just kind of local bird bath drainage issues. We've partnered with universities to do research on green stormwater infrastructure. And while less relevant to this conversation, New Haven has both separated and combined sewer areas. And so our Water Pollution Control Authority has also implemented green infrastructure in New Haven to mitigate CSOs, but also due to the success is looking to do it to kind of sewer separate, right? So separating the sewers by implementing green infrastructure. So the overlap is getting less clear and what's combined and what's separated. But this is an example of that bird bath condition. So this street, it was just for a block, has no catch basins on it, no existing stormwater infrastructure. So obviously to put catch basins in, to put new manholes, to pipe to the nearest storm sewer would have been very expensive. And we had just implemented probably about a handful of bioswales at this point. And we thought, this would be a low-cost solution to kind of clearing up this problem. And as soon as we installed this bioswale, this problem no longer existed. So we were able to use our own funds for implementing that and found it to be really successful. I should at this point say that New Haven is really blessed with having sandy subsoils. We kind of have this red, you dig 3 to 5 feet down, pretty coarse sand that has kind of unheard of infiltration rates. 40 inches an hour isn't an odd infiltration rate in New Haven. So I know the Connecticut Stormwater Manual says don't, we kind of hold developers to that. The manual says don't take credit for more than 5 inches per hour, and we kind of use that to be conservative. But we have very sandy subsoils in most of the city. There's few areas that does not hold, but so we're very lucky that that's not something we're super worried about when we go to install these, the subsoils. Another way we're using our capital funding is, taking a green stormwater infrastructure first approach. So when we do have a project where, in this case, we're doing traffic calming, and so we were doing some bump outs, those bump outs were going to interfere with existing catch basins. Instead of just looking to hard infrastructure solutions, moving a catch basin over here, turning this to a manhole, piping it, we, use green infrastructure first and create a bioswale within the bump out to, at least capture as much water and infiltrate as we can before it overflows back into the sewer. So this, while the focus of, these funds may be on traffic calming, we're getting our funds to do double duty and also install green infrastructure. And this is what it looks like in practice. Majority of the green infrastructure that we've installed has been in partnership with nonprofits. Unlike traditional stormwater infrastructure, which is all underground, and most people don't think about it unless your catch basin's overflowing. But for the most part, I would say the majority of people, probably not the people on this call, are not thinking about stormwater infrastructure when it rains, or anytime. But when you have a bioswale or something above ground that is more visually appealing, it raises questions and it becomes an opportunity to have that discussion about what stormwater, infrastructure is, why it's needed. While the city and, myself, city engineer Giovanni Zinn, love to talk to people, nonprofits are really good at communication and working with communities. It's like what they do. And so we've partnered with a lot of different nonprofits on installing, planting, and working around green infrastructure. And we think that there's a lot of co-benefits you can get with green infrastructure installations. And I think we've sought to maximize those with partnerships. One of our largest grant-funded projects was our downtown Bioswale project, which is now complete. We have 178 installations within this approximately 600-acre drainage area. This drainage area suffers from a lot of flooding during, these short duration, high intensity rainfall events. And so we received a grant, a CDBG DR post-Sandy grant to do these installations. And we're able to partner with Urban Resources Initiative, which is a nonprofit associated with Yale University, and they partner with another nonprofit, Emerge, who works with the reentry population to build all these bioswales. And they're working really great. We've had some research done. I don't have the exact results, but initial results are showing about 70% reduction in runoff during storm events. As Mary alluded to, we've had to, one of the things with our green infrastructure program is we started small. We started with one, then we started with a grant where we did 8 in one block. And then we monitored those and we tried different designs, and we've been altering our design. So the one that, is shared on UConn's website is the result of kind of an iterative, adaptive design where we had to learn some things about the fencing that kept breaking. It was less the things that had to do with actually the function of the bioswale and more with just the features that were, breaking or hard to install or costly. And so we've really worked on the design, got it standardized to a point where we're pretty comfortable. This little contraption at the inlet was one of the professors working on research. She was trying to find a way to kind of measure the inflow. So that is not a standard part, even though shown in this picture. And this granite curb edging really does help protect the fence, protect people from, falling into the bioswales, although we haven't had any issues with that. And I think people have found it to be a really attractive feature. And I think for the longevity of them will really help them hold up over time. Not going to go into the details of these, want people to know they're available. We're happy to share them and talk about them. And then, as mentioned, I think both by Deep and UConn, that this is a great opportunity to talk more about stormwater management and so we worked with URI and the Save the Sound and others who have installed these practices to make signs that we, sometimes they're very small and installed right on the fencing. Sometimes they're larger more platform signage that is installed right next to them to have that conversation and to help people understand this just isn't a garden on the side of the street, that you know, it's a functioning piece of infrastructure. But also, you know, when we're installing these, we talk to the adjacent property owners, having nonprofits like URI and Emerge working on these. They know, you know, they're from the neighborhoods, they know people in these neighborhoods, everyone, you know, they're talking to people as they're constructing them. So it's not as typical as just having like a contractor kind of come in from out of town and do work. So there's a lot of conversations happening about these from, you know, the idea of them and talking to people before they're constructed, during construction, and after construction. So we try to take advantage of all stages in order to spread the word. And, you know, I would say that 95% of people are really positive about bioswales in our community. I have a list of people that have requested bioswales. Of course, you know, citing a bioswale, you can't just put it anywhere. It has to be, you know, at the bottom of a hill, not the top of a hill. And we don't have a capital fund program where we're funding installations right now. A lot of it's been grant funded. So like that bioswale project, I was limited in where I can put them. And so, you know, but I do keep the list. So when the opportunity arises, I know the first people that are seeking out bioswales. And that's it for me. You know, there's a lot of different things we could talk about. So I'm happy to have a discussion if anyone has specific questions about our work.
That was awesome. Thank you so much, Dawn. So with that, that's pretty much it for our presentations. But if you've been to one of our TTAC meetings before with NVCOG, one of the big features of it is idea sharing. So you may have some questions for the presenters. You may also just have your own thoughts and ideas. We don't need to answer every single question today. You can just bring up a thought or a frustration or a brilliant idea you had. And I just kind of wanted to open the floor to everybody on the call, on the Zoom, who may be interested in asking or sharing, and of course, everyone here in person. So anybody want to start us off with a question or thought?
I'd like to ask Dawn what the maintenance is like on those bioswales.
Always the top question. So we have a contract right now to maintain them about 4 times a year. So each bioswale is going to get touched about 4 times a year, cleaning it of sediments and debris. You know, is that cleaning out every piece of garbage that's ever gotten into them? You know, and in a rapid form, no. But we're cleaning them out enough to have them function. And so, you know, I mean, I think leaves and garbage are obviously some of the biggest things that run off into there, but that's also a conversation that we have, you know, like particularly with litter. The litter was going somewhere anyway. So the bioswale is capturing the litter and keeping it from going in the sound is actually part of what they're supposed to do. You know, it would go in the catch basins. We know catch basins are 100% effective at keeping garbage in them and not going, you know, out through outfalls. And so, you know, it's unfortunate that some areas have high litter volumes, but the bioswales are functioning. And so, you know, when they're made, you know, we think 4 times is working out. There are some areas, you know, Yale University, I think, cleans out some of the ones around their property. You know, some of the business districts are cleaning them out a little bit more frequently. And so there's definitely room for partnering to have them cleaned more for aesthetic purposes. But we're doing our best to at least keep them functioning. And it's about $100 a bioswale for them to do it at one time. That's what we're paying right now.
I have a question for Dawn.
Sure. Yeah.
The question I have, have you had any feedback on any of these rain gardens you've installed in the curb cuts along buildings? where you might have gotten complaints of flooded basements after you put these rain gardens in the sidewalks out in front of the buildings?
Not yet, knock on wood. No, so part of, no, I mean, we've been building them since 2013, so it's not, saying like we just built them all yesterday, so it's been years. When building them, right, so part of what we did was have a discussion with adjacent property owners. So there were some sites where if there was a concern or there was a crawl space we found out was, jutting out into the sidewalk before we go to build it, we didn't build there, so we avoided spaces where, we knew that maybe there was something we need to avoid. I think also having really high infiltrating soils, we had a grad student who was doing work and put a well. So I should say that bioswales are 5 feet deep with 2.5 feet of stone and 2 feet of soil on top of that. And they had a well that went all the way to the bottom of the stone. And they were trying to take grab samples during a rain event to test water quality, in the stone layer. And they couldn't even grab water because it was, infiltrating too fast. So I also think we don't have super significant ponding for any long period of time in our bioswales, such that there's not as much migration horizontally and it's mostly going vertical. I know that other communities have put, when concerned about that, I know there was one block in New York City that happened in Brooklyn, and they ended up retrofitting with a piece of like PVC all the way down, essentially just putting a plastic barrier on that backside, if that is a concern, to keep, kind of force that water to go down.
Yeah, if I could just add real quick, placement of rain gardens or bioretention or any kind of infiltration practice like that. You do have to be careful about doing them too close to a foundation where there's, a basement or other space underneath. And so we always recommend, and I think Mary put this in the chat, to place them at least 10 feet away from any sort of structure like that, to avoid that problem of that water seeping into the basement. Sort of like, when you have a downspout at your house or something like that, you put in one of those extenders to keep the water away from the foundation so it doesn't seep in. And so usually when you do that, you avoid those problems of water seeping into a basement.
While I have Dawn's attention, I'd like to ask another question. If you guys have used pervious surfaces in parking lots, do you have any issue with unstable surfaces where you're parking heavy trucks or high traffic? Because you said the sub base is not compacted.
That was not me talking about those. We actually have not been using pervious pavement on any significant scale on city properties. There's been some developers that have, but I think it was Mary that spoke a bit about pervious pavement in Colchester. But New Haven has not been actively installing pervious pavement. More concerned about maintenance of them and vacuuming them over time, and it's just not something we have the capability to do.
Yeah, I'll just add on the UConn campus, we've installed several different types of pervious pavements, from pervious interlocking concrete pavers to pervious asphalt to pervious concrete. And, it's sort of an experiment over the last 10 years or so to see what works in different situations. And it's a great question, because you have to design it for the use. So if you're going to be getting a lot of trucks on it, then you have to design it to be able to withstand those loads. For example, on North Eagleville Road on the UConn campus, we have bus stops now, sort of bus turnouts, right, for the buses to pull into, and that's obviously a very heavy load. So normal pervious asphalt would not be able to support that much weight and would sort of degrade pretty quickly. So we use some pervious interlocking concrete pavers in those areas that allow water to infiltrate in, but they have a metal structure underneath that provides that support, so that when the buses pull in there is that support there that sort of distributes that weight so it doesn't collapse under that type of weight. So you have to think about where you're putting the practice and what uses are going to be on that, and then sort of adjust, as necessary. Now, if you're putting in a pervious asphalt lot and, maybe a couple times a year a fire truck's going to drive on it or something like that, is that going to do damage? No, but repeated use, if you're putting it in sort of at a loading dock, you need to, anticipate that way and sort of engineer for it.
And I will say, in terms of Colchester, the last time I talked to town engineer, they haven't had any issues with that. It's more like Dom was saying about that maintenance, really making sure you're properly maintaining the pervious asphalt. So using a couple times a year, using those vacuum trucks, making sure that you have those areas to allow the water to infiltrate in, making sure that you're not using any sand on it, especially when it could, like some people put down sand when it gets icy out, you can't use sand on it. So just, I think the maintenance really is the important aspect of that.
Thanks. Anyone can feel free to jump in.
Yeah, question. What's everyone's thought about hydrodynamic separators? We're putting in some, replacing some rather large pipes going directly to the river. And obviously, it's impossible to attack the whole watershed at once.
This is Chris Stone. We have seen some, there's been some testing done. The University of New Hampshire Stormwater Center has done a lot of really great testing on different stormwater measures. They did do testing on swirl concentrators. I forget exactly which ones. And they do have some success. They don't necessarily, they're not as efficient as the manufacturers may claim, saying that, a single structure will get 80% sediment removal. And I'd have to go back and look at the figures, but I believe it was somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 to 60%. They are getting sediment removal, and the nice thing with hydrodynamic or swirl concentrators is, as opposed to a catch basin or something like that, is that for the most part, once that sediment is there, it stays there because of the action of the spiral action of the water flowing through there. It doesn't tend to resuspend the sediment as much as just a traditional deep sump catch basin or something like that. So they do have their place. But like everything else, they do have to be maintained. You have to clean them out periodically. But especially in an area where you may have, physical constraints about what you can put in there, they do have their place.
And can I just follow up on that question, Chris? So in terms of disconnection, though, if it's flowing into a hydrodynamic separator, that's not considered disconnected just by going through that, right? Under the
no, that's just treatment, unless it actually, infiltrates the water or stores it for release at another, at a different point, like a rain barrel or something like that. That's not going to meet your disconnection, but it will meet any treatment requirements.
I see a lot of developers putting those in prior to their, underground infiltration retention systems to do pre-treatment to not clog the retention system.
Yeah, that's a very good point, particularly if you have like any kind of a subsurface system, like the system you showed, Dawn, with the large pipes going in underground. Obviously, getting in to clean something like that is a major operation. But if you pre-treat and collect the majority of sediments, or at least the coarser sediments, ahead of time with a hydrodynamic separator, it is, we see them a lot used as pre-treatment.
Yeah, that's what we've done in Watertown, just to speak up. I don't allow the separators alone. They have to be subsequent with some infiltrator or above ground rain garden or a water quality pond. But I do allow them to be incorporated in the whole system that someone's proposing. So.
Yeah, John.
I'll try and direct my voice at the owl from back here. But the folks at DEEP, you have all the information from all the states that are, or all of the towns and cities that have to comply. Are there any themes that come through from small and medium-sized towns that they are a little behind in compliance that you see statewide?
Yeah, it's the things that I mentioned in the presentation. The IDDE program, illicit discharge detection, is a tough one. It's very labor intensive. You actually have to get out there and pop manholes and find, outfall points and may even have to do sampling to confirm, if it hasn't rained in a week and you go to an outfall and there's some kind of pink liquid coming out there, chances are that's pretty good that it's an illicit discharge. But that's the beginning of the procedure. Then you've got to kind of trace it back upstream, structure by structure to see if you can figure out where that's coming from. It can get even tougher if what's coming out there maybe doesn't really have a color, but maybe it's got an odor, and it could be natural, it might not. So you have to take a sample and analyze it. And we do have there's kind of a flow chart that tells you, if you see a particular pollutant, if you detect surfactants in a runoff, that's an indication of detergents. So it could be someone's washing machine that goes to a floor drain in their basement or something like that. But that's tough because it means really looking at the entire system. And then the other one, that we mentioned that we've been talking about more is the Dcia disconnection process. Finding and funding a retrofit project gets pretty involved. Again, you can meet a lot of that requirement just by keeping an eye on private projects that are disconnecting, and you can take credit for those in your disconnection requirement. But I'd say those are probably the two biggest things. Mapping used to be one of the big ones, but with the Yukon impervious cover mapping, that's gone a long way, and just the general mapping that's available out there for and the GIS systems. Most towns have gotten a handle now on their outfall mapping, and then we've got now the impervious cover mapping. So that was one of the ones that really took a while to get off the ground, but it's doing pretty well now. So hopefully we'll see the same things with IDDE and the DCIA disconnection.
Great, thank you.
And Chris, this is Karen. I'll just chime in as well. I will say over the last couple of years, we have seen more statements like monitoring, not really, we haven't gotten to the monitoring because of COVID issues. So that, I would say, just over the last couple of years, I think some of the monitoring has fallen a bit by the wayside. Not sure about trends specifically though, big towns, small towns, because there's, in some cases, the big towns, their cities they might have some more resources, but they also have like a lot more outfalls that they need to be investigating. But it's a good question. That might be a good initiative for us, is to try to see if we're, differentiating how the bigger towns are doing versus the smaller towns.
Could I ask a question of the participants that are there, just sort of following up on that question? So what are the things that your communities have struggled with the most in the permit? I mean, I think this is an opportunity to maybe provide feedback to Deep on that as well here, but just sort of what it's helpful for us too, as sort of folks who are trying to provide education and support for communities in complying with the permit. What are the things that have been sort of the most vexing for your communities? If anyone's willing to offer with the regulators in the room, of course.
This is being
I think the big thing is trying to not keep up, but the disconnecting DCIAs is not the thing that you just go out and do as a matter of course. Any new private development. Luckily, I had a few come in that had like an acre or so of impervious area. We were able to disconnect those, but out of over 400, whatever the area, our baseline, over 460 acres we have in the town, it's not easy to get that 1% a year. I'm just thinking from our town's perspective, we have, what is it, 68 ponds, detention ponds? We have something like that, 60 something.
Yeah.
It's tough enough for us to keep up with maintenance of those things, but if, just thinking we might be able to go back and retrofit some of those to get that 1-inch water quality volume in some of these. It's just a thought I just had, but other than that, unless some private developer comes in, we don't have a lot of opportunity to disconnect our own town, areas. So that's something we're struggling with, so.
And actually, I also have a question for the towns in the room. And Dave touched on this earlier. The mapping that Yukon has is just impervious cover. It doesn't indicate whether or not it's connected. And there are several routes you can take to kind of take that overall impervious cover map and come up with your directly connected impervious cover. There are kind of algorithms that you can use, formulas based on land use that will estimate that for you. Everything right down to, windshield analysis, going and driving around and saying, okay, yeah, that's the school parking lot, and then actually runs off into the ball field. So we're going to take that off our impervious cover map. I'm just curious as to how much effort the towns have had to expend to, or if they have, to take that initial impervious cover and try to estimate how much of that is actually directly connected and what methods you use to do that. I mean, first of all, are you folks all using the Yukon mapping?
Yeah, we did in Watertown. Yeah, that was certainly a help once I realized, oh my God, all these that was definitely helped, those algorithms. That was short of spending 1,000 hours on some of my text to do the individual, and like I said, drive through areas. Yeah, I use those algorithms. They're a big help.
Oh, so you did. Oh, good.
Absolutely.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, of course.
Is there any state or federal grant money available to help us install some impervious areas or start some projects? Our budget is very limited as to what we have. We could barely do the maintenance that we have, let alone start new projects.
Exactly.
So basically, we are as a COG, and there are, as Dawn, I think, highlighted, there are definitely other nonprofit grant funders for these projects, in particular for urban areas. But as COG, we're right now applying for funds to give you some assistance in that. We can't do the whole project, but we want to help to identify larger private owners as well as possible municipal projects where, essentially the location would be conducive, and then possibly providing some engineering support to determine, what the dimensions are, et cetera. And then, in particular with private property, there's that opportunity for partnership if a private business park or something wants to basically, present themselves as being an eco-friendly, sustainable development, either from the beginning or as a retrofit. As Dawn was showing, there are definitely arrangements of rain gardens and swales that are quite attractive as well, that can be part of a landscaping effort. So, and even, again, going back to Dawn's presentation, even, cost effective treatment. So that's the direction in general that the agency's heading in. I don't know if Aaron, if you want to speak to that a little more.
Yeah, I mean, we're really interested in any way that we can help the towns in our region comply. So, we've talked about, and I could talk a little bit about some work we've already done. Mary mentioned earlier that in 2017, we did we reviewed all of your local land use regulations and sort of identified where in them the permit required changes and suggested ways to change them. And also we looked at barriers to LID installation as well in all of your, subdivision regulations and zoning regs and everything like that too. And we provided all those reports to the towns, and we can, we'll follow up after this and resend those to you guys. And we're also going back and looking at them now. I think it was you, Jim, at the last CTAC meeting mentioned going back and seeing how everyone's doing. We're doing that now. It's sort of a heavy lift, so it's gonna take a little time, but we've also, done some, provided several towns with assistance on system mapping. So we've provided the ArcGIS online tools to go out in the field and actually, map your systems out. We've trained several staff to do that. And that assistance, Glenda's on the call right now, our GIS director. We can still provide that now if there's still a need out there. But we really want to hear from you guys about any assistance we could provide. And like Josh said, we're looking at several grant opportunities that are out there where we can get a program up and running. Like there's elsewhere, especially in Massachusetts, there's a stormwater collaboratives where towns pay into a program that provides education, helps with whatever needs might be, provides equipment to share amongst towns. So we could get something like that up and running. We could possibly hire an engineer or an engineering firm to go and provide assistance and start helping towns identify areas where they could do disconnections. So we're really open to ideas, but we're exploring every grant that we see out there that we could potentially apply for. We're looking at it, and I think what we would need from everybody is sort of more targeted guidance as to what you really need.
And from a state perspective, in terms of the state and federal funding, we kind of have a catch-22, unfortunately, where most EPA grant programs, actually all of them that I know of, that would grant directly to the municipality, there's a restriction that says they can't give you money for something that's you're already required to do in a permit. So, but COGS getting that money instead and passing it down is one avenue. And I put a plug in at the end of my presentation. I'll put another plug in here for stormwater utilities. We just had legislation passed to make it much easier for towns in the state to get stormwater utilities. New London's been doing it now for a couple of years with great success. And if you want to learn more about it, on May 4th, Dave and Mary are going to be doing a little workshop on, and Mary put up the link on stormwater utilities. They did one a couple weeks ago, and there's another one here on, is it right for me and how do I do it if I decide I want to? We're really hoping this takes off, because that's the type of thing that provides you, and it's actually better than a grant. It's not a one-time fund, it's ongoing funding, so you can plan ahead, you can bond, you can tackle more complex projects and know that you have an ongoing income stream. One of them, really the major benefit of stormwater utilities, besides getting the money in, is that money is set aside. It is for stormwater only. The way it's set up, it cannot be rated for something else. You pay your water and sewer bills, and the stormwater utility works. It's a utility fee, just like a water and sewer bill, and that money, for your water and sewer bills, doesn't go to pay for sidewalks or ball fields. It stays with water and sewer concerns, and the same thing applies with the stormwater utility. So, that's an ongoing stream, not just that one-time funding grant. But in terms of the smaller projects, the things that can be done with a one-time grant, I think that's where the COGS can be a big help.
Okay, I want to thank everybody. We're sort of coming up against our sort of hour and a half timing for the meeting. If you have any further questions or thoughts, please do feel free to reach out to us or to any of our wonderful presenters from today. Before we close the meeting, I just wanted to comment quickly. As Josh mentioned earlier, we're starting these environmental sustainability forums. Not all of them will necessarily apply to public works because we know sustainability sort of covers a lot of different departments, but if anybody has any ideas or thoughts about future themes that we could do that are important to you guys, or if you want more about MS4, please just let me know, shoot me an email and just get thinking about it. What's something pertinent in your town that you'd like to learn more about? And with that, I think we'll say thank you so much to our presenters. Thank you everyone who attended virtually and in person. And thank you to Sultans from Waterbury for providing our lunch.
And thank you very much to Christine for organizing all of
Oh,
this.
my
and getting
pleasure.
some presenters for us.
All right, and this will be recorded, so I'm going to send this afterwards. Anyone who missed today will be able to follow up.